Alright guys, I got a lot of PMs about how to make this, and I was gonna try to make a Word document, and it just seemed like it would be quicker and easier to make a quick video. So here's the panel I made. You can see it's got a top spot where the switches are. It just kind of curves around, and it's got a little seat on the bottom for it to sit on, and I left enough room to get the wires in there. Honestly, I think I could have done it without this bottom part, because it really, once it wedges in there, I mean, it's not going anywhere. But that's just kind of my initial design, and it worked, so I just didn't mess with it. The tools that I used, it's really easy. I got this ABS plastic to make it out of off eBay. I got 1/16 and 1/8 inch. I ended up using the 1/16 because the 1/8 just, I got this in the mail first and I used it and it just worked well, so that's just what I ended up going with. I used paper to make the initial template, and then construction paper to make the kind of the one I went off of for the plastic, just because it holds together a little bit easier. The way I made the first template was I didn't try to make the entire thing all at once, because it was just turning into too much of a pain in the ass. So I cut out the paper to go in the bottom spot, the little, where you're saying you put your sunglasses or whatever, and then I made the part that is going to connect the two large pieces. I measured that out, and basically what I was doing is I was just putting a piece of paper in there, kind of folding it around and then cutting around it back and forth until it fit just right. Same with this piece that connects the two large ones, and then the top piece, same thing. Put a piece of paper in there, trimmed and cut and folded until it looked right, and then I just sort of taped all these pieces together, outlined it, and came up with my final template. And I mean, there's not really a good way to replicate the angles on this, so really all you can do is put this on the ABS, mark around it, and then try to just back and forth from your car as far as bending it. And I'll get into that. To cut the ABS out, you just use a razor. You can use, just if all you got is one of these. You don't have to cut through the whole thing. I'll cut a little chunk off just so you can see, but basically all you have to do is just get a nice deep score on it, and then just wiggle it back and forth, and it just pops right out. It doesn't matter if it's a bend, if it's a corner like that. Just wiggle both sides and it'll pop right out. It's real easy to use. As far as once you get it out, folding it how it needs to be, or bending it rather, I just used a heat gun. I had some gloves to keep from burning my hands, and I initially just was going to practice with one piece because I got a shitload of this stuff in case I messed it up, and the first piece ended up working, so I just used it. But basically you just are going to heat it back and forth with the heat gun across the angle that you want to bend, and then I would just put it, if it was going to be a straight bend, I would just put it on the edge of something and just kind of crinkle it down where I needed it to be. When you're heating it with the gun, you'll know if you heat it too long, because it'll just start bending over on its own, and obviously that's not what you want. But so once you kind of start bending, I know I do it close to your car because there's going to be a lot of back and forth. It doesn't fit quite right. You got to trim it. Even though the template fit perfect, I probably went back and forth between my car a couple dozen times just to get everything to fit just right. So cut it out with the template, bend it until it fits just right. And then as far as covering it with the material, I had the guy that did some upholstery work on my center console. I kind of befriended him, and he just sewed up the material for me, which I'm sure if you go to any automotive shop they'll do this for you. But he just sewed up where I wanted the French seams, and I got a ton of it from him because I'm planning on using it on some other stuff. But I just cut as much as I needed to go around this whole thing, and then I just sort of trimmed the shape of it. And as far as gluing it in, he gave me some, it's by Wellwood, it's called Top and Trim. I did a lot of research online and everybody says you can just use contact cement. And I asked him about it, and he said that you can, but if it's hot or humid in your climate, excuse me, it'll come right off after a few years. So this shit's super expensive. I was lucky that he gave it to me. The smallest container I found that you could buy of it online is a gallon, and then of course it's going to be a lot to send it because it's heavy. So if you're going to buy it on your own, you're probably not going to get out of it for less than 40 or 50 bucks just for the glue alone. But everything else is dirt cheap. So I mean, that's really going to be your only investment. As far as gluing it on there, I didn't try to glue the whole thing at a time. I would glue like one little section, and then I would sort of trim around it, let it dry overnight, or 20 minutes, and it's on there. Glue the next section, because I'm sure a professional could do it all at once, but gluing it section by section gave me a little more wiggle room as far as making mistakes, and it just made it easier. And I just kind of stretch it as you go on and just loop it around, on the back of it. I don't know if you can see it there, but loop it around, glue it on the back side. Whenever you initially paint this stuff on, just let it, I timed it, and it was about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes. I'd let it sit on there before I put it on, because you want it to get a little bit of tack to it. And you want to put a light coat on what you're gluing it to, and you want to put a light coat on what you're gluing to it. So you're going to put some glue on the material as well as the plastic. And you're just going to hold it on there. I just kind of held it on and stretched it and held it and stretched it. And after a few minutes, I mean, the shit's on there. It's not going anywhere. It's not coming off. So you really don't need to worry about it coming off. And there'll be a little bit of shine I noticed on it, and it was just the oil coming out of the adhesive, but it just dries right up and goes away. As far as, I also found what I put the glue on with was just this little foam paintbrush. You can get it at any hardware store. I also found if you've got a syringe of any kind, that'll be helpful. There'll be some areas where, for whatever reason, when you're stretching it didn't get quite in, so you can use this and get some of the glue in there and just shoot it in where you need it to be. And then just the same way as you do, just hold it, put compression on it and hold it. As far as the trimming around it and pulling it around, I really don't have any awesome advice on that. It was just sort of trial and error. I put it on there, it seems to be holding good. If you take it out and were to look at the backside, it probably doesn't look like a professional did it, but looking from the outside, the parts that you can actually see, it's solid. I mean, it looks like I had somebody do it. So just make sure you get the spots on the outside right, and it doesn't matter how ugly it is on the back. I can't really think of, and I did not drill the holes for the switches until after everything was complete, because I wanted to put it in the car and figure out exactly where I wanted it. And my friend Jamie, the upholstery guy, told me that it's easier to drill holes, after it's on there. The material will be more clean, and you won't have to worry about lining the holes up when you're trying to glue it. So just don't even worry about it till you're done. And to be honest, I put it in there without the holes, and even if you don't have any switches, it looked pretty cool just being in there. It kind of covered up that little spot. I can't really think of anything else off the top of my head that I kind of had to learn the hard way on this. It's pretty straightforward. Really, the only tough part about it is just going to be finding somebody to sew your shit for you and bending it. That with the heat gun, that was such a pain. But you'll just be patient with it, and it'll fit eventually. But yeah, probably the only thing that I would say that I'd do differently if I was to do it over again, I don't think, so here's where it sits in, and I put this little bottom piece on to hold it up. The way this slides in there, I don't think I needed the bottom piece. I think it would have stayed in place just fine without that on there. So you can try it that way or without, whichever, but I think if I was going to mass produce these things, I wouldn't put the bottom on there, because I don't think it's necessary. But I hope that helps. if you've got any questions, put it in the comments and I'll answer it as best I can when I get time. But it's super cool and super cheap, you know, to make. I bought a ton of this vinyl material. I bought like 5 meters of this shit from him with French seam sewn in it for $100. So if you're gonna get like just enough to do this, it probably would be less than $10, you know, because it hardly takes anything to do this. But I'd get some extra just in case you mess up any of it. But just take your time. And, you know, you don't have to be a master upholsterer to do this one. It's pretty simple. But I hope that helps. Good luck.